Alright guys, Dominic here for KitGuru, and today's video has actually been requested by a few members from our Discord server, as we are going to be revisiting AMD's RX 7900 XT. I'm not going to call this a re-review, but after some significant price cuts, I thought it was high time to see exactly what this GPU can bring to the table in a head-to-head against Nvidia's RTX 4070 Ti in a massive 44 benchmark battle. So as I alluded to in that introduction, the RX 7900 XT has seen some hefty price cuts since its introduction in December last year. It launched with an MSRP of £900, which nobody thought was good value, but in the month since it's actually dropped to £740 on Overclockers UK right now, and I've even seen it as low as £700. That really puts it in the same ballpark as Nvidia's RTX 4070 Ti, which launched in January with an MSRP of $799, but different models have been available on sale since then, including this one for £750, depending on the deals of the day. That really made me think it was high time I put these two GPUs head to head and see which came out on top. In total, I tested 44 games, 32 of which were being your standard rasterization titles, but then I also tested another 12 with ray tracing enabled, so we do get both sides of the spectrum. I tested those at 1080p, 1440p and 4K. In terms of the graphics cards themselves then, on the AMD side I went for the Sapphire RX 7900 XT Pulse, and this ships with a mild factory overclock, and as we've already seen today, it's currently on sale for £740. Over on the Nvidia side, I went for the Gigabyte RTX 4070 Ti Gaming OC, which is more expensive but again only ships with a mild factory overclock, making these two cards very apt for a comparison. All of our testing was of course done with our regular GPU test system, which is supplied to us by PC Specialist. This is built on Intel's i9-13900KS CPU, and we've paired that with the Gigabyte Z790 Gaming X AX motherboard, and we've got 32GB of Corsair Dominator Platinum RGB DDR5 memory. All testing was also done over the last couple of weeks, so it's as fresh as possible using the latest drivers from AMD and Nvidia. In this video then, I'm going to highlight a selection of those 44 games. Obviously, we can't go over all of them in this video, otherwise we'd be here for hours. There will be a performance breakdown towards the end of the video, but if you do want to see the specific numbers from any of those 44 games, head over to the written article on KitGuruTech, where every single one of those benchmarks will be available. Without further ado though, let's dive into the benchmarks. Kicking things off with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, this is with the latest Season 5 update applied, and I have to say it is a bit of a shellacking for Nvidia. I was honestly quite surprised by these results, as COD isn't a game I typically test, but at 1440p the RX 7900 XT delivers 169 FPS, making it 29% faster than the RTX 4070 Ti, which hit 131 FPS average. Stepping up to 4K is manageable for both GPUs, but once more it's the 7900 XT with a 29% advantage, with an average FPS of just over 100 compared to the sub 80 FPS average for the 4070 Ti. Cyberpunk 2077 is a very different kettle of fish though, and things are a lot closer at 1440p, with the 7900 XT delivering about 103 FPS compared to 91 FPS for the 4070 Ti, and that makes the AMD GPU 12% faster. The difference between the 1% lows isn't as large however, with just an 8% advantage for the Radeon GPU. At 4K though, we do see the AMD GPU stretch ahead, likely due to the limited memory bandwidth of the 4070 Ti, given it only has a 192-bit memory interface. Here at this resolution, the 7900 XT is 21% faster, delivering 51 FPS on average compared to 42 FPS for the Nvidia GPU. As you might expect though, that situation is flipped on its head when we enable the Ultra Ray Tracing settings. Please note this isn't RT Overdrive path tracing, but just the regular Ultra Ray Tracing option. Straight away, the 7900 XT drops 25% behind the 4070 Ti at 1440p, and it barely manages 30 FPS on average, though of course this is without FSR or DLSS, and we can also see that the 4070 Ti is much smoother with an average of 43 FPS. 4K isn't playable on either GPU, so any difference is purely academic, but the 7900 XT is still 21% slower at this resolution. Up next, we have the Dead Space Remake, which we've tested without ray tracing. At 1440p, the margins are pretty similar to Cyberpunk, as the AMD GPU comes in 12% faster than its Nvidia rival, hitting 115 FPS on average compared to 103 FPS for the 4070 Ti. Frame rates are still respectable at 4K, but once more it's the 7900 XT stretching ahead. This time it's 21% faster than the 4070 Ti, delivering about 60 FPS on average, while the Nvidia GPU falls just below 50 FPS. As for F123, this is the latest installment of this franchise, which really does pump up the frame rates, and both GPUs deliver in excess of 120 FPS at 1440p. That said, it is again the Radeon card with the advantage, as it comes in 20% faster. That lead grows slightly if you game at 4K as well, where the 7900 XT is able to deliver over 110 FPS, whereas the Nvidia GPU falls below the 100 FPS mark, making Team Red 23% faster. I also enabled the full range of ray tracing in F123, and I have to say the results were pretty surprising. Over all three resolutions tested, the 7900 XT was within just 5% of the 4070 Ti. Yes, the Nvidia GPU was faster, but only very marginally. Up next then, we come to Hogwarts Legacy, another popular title released this year, and while the 1% lows aren't the best for either GPU, we can still see a lead for the RX 7900 XT, with it coming in 17% faster at 1440p, where it's able to deliver just over 110 FPS. As we've now come to expect, that margin also grows slightly at 4K as the 4070 Ti falls off, and AMD's GPU is now 21% faster. Of course, you can also enable ray tracing in Hogwarts Legacy, which we've done here, and this will drop the frame rates significantly. It's not quite a bloodbath for Nvidia, but at 1440p, the 7900 XT is now 14% slower with ray tracing enabled, when it was 17% faster without ray tracing. That actually increases as well, as the 7900 XT comes in 25% slower at 4K, but the 1% lows do take a real hit at this resolution, and neither card provides an enjoyable experience. There's no ray tracing in The Last of Us Part 1 though, and with the latest patches, it's actually a pretty good experience these days. The 7900 XT is the faster card, holding a 15% lead over the 4070 Ti at 1440p, and that extends slightly to a 17% advantage up at 4K, where both GPUs are still delivering a very playable experience. As for A Plague Tale Requiem then, this is a much closer affair, and it's actually one of the most demanding games we test, with the results here being shown without any ray tracing. At 1440p, there's honestly not much to split between these two GPUs. The 7900 XT is faster, but only by 6%, so I'm not sure you'd really notice much difference. Both GPUs also drop well below 60 FPS at 4K, though the 7900 XT is still 11% faster. As for the newest title on test, that is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which is still with ray tracing disabled. I found that both the 7900 XT and 4070 Ti were almost a dead match for each other here, with the exception being that the 1% lows are actually far superior on the AMD side at 1080p and 1440p resolutions. I'm not 100% sure why this is, and I did actually also retest with the latest Nvidia hotfix driver for this game specifically, and it didn't make any difference in my testing, but hopefully we will see tighter frame times from a future driver or game update. Closing out then with a look at Returnal, here we're starting with ray tracing disabled, and it's pretty easy to summarise. Things are fairly close overall, but across all three resolutions tested, the 7900 XT comes in 12% faster than the 4070 Ti. That does change when we enable ray tracing, but not as drastically as you might think. The 7900 XT is 9% slower at 1440p and actually still averages over 70 FPS, while at 4K it's now 8% slower with an average frame rate of just over 40 FPS. That's going to do it then for the selection of games I want to show in this video, and instead we're going to go ahead and look at the 44 game average results, combining all 32 rasterized games with the 12 ray tracing titles that I tested. What we can see here may surprise you, but things are actually very close indeed. At 1440p, the 7900 XT comes in at just 5% faster than the RTX 4070 Ti, and at 4K, that margin is only 7% in favour of the Radeon GPU. What's interesting is if we remove the 12 ray trace games from the results and only look at the average of the 32 rasterized titles, the margins do improve slightly for the 7900 XT, but not massively. From being 5% faster before at 1440p, it's now 8% faster when we take ray tracing out of the equation. Likewise, at 4K, it was 7% faster before, and now it's 10% faster. It is certainly something, but I'd actually say the margins aren't quite as large as I might have thought after all of that testing. Just out of interest as well, if we only look at the 12 games we tested with ray tracing enabled, the 7900 XT comes in 12% slower on average at every resolution tested. So it is definitely behind the 4070 Ti here, but it's not like it's miles behind. Here now we've moved on and we've switched ahead to look at the per game breakdown of all 44 titles tested today at 1440p, be it rasterized or ray traced games. The 7900 XT gets its biggest wins in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and God of War, but it's 10% faster or more than the 4070 Ti in a total of 16 games. Most of the games where it's slower than the 4070 Ti are the ones where we have ray tracing enabled, with the exception of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, but in those two we're only looking at 4 and 5% deficits respectively. As for the 4K breakdown as well, we've already shown how the 4070 Ti falls off here due to its limited memory bandwidth, but it's interesting to see now that there's actually a total of 19 games where the 7900 XT is at least 10% faster than the 4070 Ti. The only games where it's slower by more than a 2% margin are those ray trace titles, with the heaviest loss coming in Dying Light 2. Just before I wrap up though, I do also want to touch on power draw. Alongside all of the frame rate testing today, I also use Nvidia's PCAT tool to capture power draw figures over every single one of those 44 games that I benchmarked. As you can see here, there are some substantial differences in power draw between these two GPUs. The RX 7900 XT almost always drew between 320 and 325 watts of power regardless of the game or resolution. The 4070 Ti, however, is much less power hungry, particularly at 1080p and 1440p, where it drew less than 250 watts on average. Even at 4K, its average power draw is below 260 watts, making it about 70 watts lower than the 7900 XT. Considering those pretty large differences in power draw, it quickly becomes clear that the 4070 Ti is significantly more efficient. This chart here shows the performance per watt of each GPU, or how many frames are rendered per watt of power. At 1440p for instance, the 7900 XT is actually 24% less efficient than the 4070 Ti. The AMD GPU does narrow the gap at 4K, but it still remains 17% less efficient, something which is well worth factoring into any final buying decision. Overall then, I have to say I've actually had a lot of fun putting these two GPUs head to head for this benchmark battle. It definitely ended up being more work than I originally intended, but hopefully you have found the data useful, and at the very least there's been some interesting game benchmarks. I am, however, having a really tough time actually deciding which of these two GPUs I think is the superior product. On the one hand, the RX 7900 XT is faster for rasterization, it has 67% more VRAM, and it is generally the cheaper of the two. On the other hand, the RTX 4070 Ti really isn't that much slower overall, and it is actually faster for ray tracing, it draws less power and is more efficient overall, plus you do also get the benefits of both DLSS 2 and DLSS 3, which we haven't looked at in this video. I really do think if the RTX 4070 Ti had 16GB of VRAM, the decision would be much easier, but 20GB on the RX 7900 XT is a significant difference versus the 12GB frame buffer of the 4070 Ti, which really does look quite meagre at this price point. With my decision then hinging primarily on that factor, I think if I did have £750 today to spend on a new graphics card, I would go with AMD's 7900 XT purely due to the extra peace of mind that the frame buffer would provide. I really don't think if you're spending this much money you want to be running into potential image quality compromises due to a lack of memory, and I don't know when that might happen with the 4070 Ti, but it's definitely going to happen sooner for that GPU than it would for the 20GB 7900 XT. Of course, if you disagree with me though, I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. So if you liked it, please do toss me a thumbs up. And as I've already said, let me know your thoughts down below. Please do subscribe and ding that notification bell if you haven't already. And why not come chat with us on our Discord server, which is linked in the description. While you're there, you can also find links to our merch store where you can pick up a cool t-shirt like the ones on screen. And lastly, if you are feeling particularly generous, it would be awesome if you guys would come over to our Patreon and support us on there. That is it for this one though, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.